broadcast. Those of you watching this, not listening to the recording, you can see that my space is starting to get organized. Look at this, man. I got no boxes here. Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah, there's a pile like right over there. And, I didn't have time to like sort them out. So it's every brand, model, and type all just shoved into one little space.
Oh, the heresy of it.
Go through. Yeah, it's
mixing your Nikon lenses with Canon.
Yeah, Canon, Nikon, Sony, Panasonic, it's you name it. There's a pile of it over there. All right. You ready to go live, Devin?
Absolutely.
We're recording audio. Video's on. I've got the questions up, guys. So if anybody decides to watch this live, which maybe they do, I don't know, we will try to answer those as they come in. Q&A, got the Q&A turned on. All right, in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. Devin joins me today. He was out at the races. Devin, you drove a car. Tell me about it.
Oh, it's one of those experiences where they let you behind the wheel of a tuned down IndyCar, and you get to drive that around the track. And I was lucky enough to be able to get up to a speed of 158.5 miles per hour around the oval track, which was a lot of fun and a lot of adrenaline.
Holy cow. They let you drive that? Is there some kind of waiver in case you die or something?
Oh, there is pages and pages of waivers of all kinds of things that could go wrong. The lucky part is, though, they locked it all into one gear. They don't want people to try to shift gears in that car. So they literally start it by push starting the car. You pop the clutch, and then you just sit in one gear, and you ride that one gear all the way up to 150 miles an hour. Because I'm pretty sure everyone would burn out the clutch trying to shift an IndyCar for the first time.
How the hell does one gear go up to 150 miles an hour? That seems...
I'm guessing it's the gear in the middle of the range. I mean, usually those cars are like 6 gears or so. So I'm guessing they just took third gear, and the engine has enough horsepower and torque that it can kind of, if you're rolling at 15 miles an hour, it won't stall the engine. And then it takes you quite a while to get it all the way up there. And I could feel it. When I was going slower and I put the throttle down, it's just like if you're in fifth gear in your car and you try to accelerate, it just goes because it's not in the right gear for it. But the whole thing is to be at the top speed. So eventually, after a lap, you get up to the top speed and you're in the corners and you're feeling like 1G, maybe it was a little bit over a G, like trying to pull you out of the seat, but a lot of fun.
On my side, nothing exciting has been happening other than unpacking more and more boxes. I've got my farm of rendering computers down below my desk right now. And actually, I'm going to show you the secret. Hey, look, I'm wearing shorts. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4 computers underneath of my desk right now.
That you're bumping your knees into. Bumping your knees into and turning off by accident.
I know, right? So if you're wondering why I have all those, if you look into your Adobe manual, you'll find that you can set up nodes and render stuff out really fast if you have multiple CPUs running at the same time. So just some kind of cool little trick when I'm trying to render out stuff really fast, it can assign little bits of the project to each of those computers and go on a network. So I've also got my switch over here, somewhere right here. Here it is. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so nothing really exciting, but it's warm outside, and now I'm sitting in front of 4 computers, so it's even warmer in here. Nice. Otherwise, nothing too exciting to report. I think it might be time for us to quit stalling and move on to the news. Time for the news. Time for the news. And actually, I say time for the news, but then I want to show you a show and tell project that I'm still continuing to work on. I talked about this last episode with Mitch, and now I'm going to show it to Devin because it's kind of sweet. I've got this guy right behind me here, and I'm going to grab it now.
I've been waiting in bated breath. This sounds sexy.
This is my current editing build. I'm trying to build something really small here. And this is a mini ITX board, full Pentium, i7 4770K, I believe in here. 2 SSDs, 1 terabyte each. I've got a GTX 970 that was going in here, but the Asus GTX 970 that first came in was dead on arrival. So that's being made right now. Once that's in, this little box right here, super tiny, super efficient.
For the poor listeners, his computer case is probably a little bit bigger than 1 foot by 1 foot. It's small enough he could hide it under his shirt if he had to.
Okay, so here is a Canon 6D with a 51.2 on it and the lens hood, and it is just about the height of this system. That's how freaking small this is. Yeah, it's I think 12 or 11 inches. So yeah, just about a foot. You're right.
What's the cause for the recent fascination with tiny editing computers?
Okay, so I have my laptop, which is again being ARM-made. Thanks for that. The GTX, whatever. My freaking laptop is to you again. It's being sent back in. The motherboard failed yet again. So I was like, well, this is a good excuse to try and experiment with like building a really tiny, high-powered system. And the GTX 970 is no slouch for editing. And this form factor is something that I could, maybe attach a handle to and drag with me somewhere or throw in my luggage or whatever, and then use whatever monitor is available when I get there. So really interesting. Price wise, I'm looking at, I think the total budget's going to be a little bit under $800 by the time I'm done building this. So not really expensive, but a lot of horsepower under the hood in a really tiny form factor. Now, on the side note here, I was able to tack some of the cost of this machine onto a couple of projects that I'm working on. So that's part of why I'm wasting money on another machine, is because I can. But
because after he says, I've got 4 computers underneath me right now, he pulls out the 5th one from behind him. But I just made this one. It's really cool. Check it out.
Well, in my defense, I keep most of my older systems. So there's a i7 920 underneath of me, as well as an AMD 8150 system underneath of me, and then an i7 830, I think. So they're fairly dated systems, but they're still quad core, they're still hyperthread, so they do actually render projects pretty well. And each one of those systems.
Is there a reason why you went with that case instead of the N-Case M1 prototype?
This is so freaking small, and it was only $40.
All right, because I do think the N-Case is like $100. It was a Kickstarter that they had. A buddy of mine actually bought one. And I think
you're talking about the one with the like built-in cooling system where it was like aluminum and like machined to fit the motherboard and stuff like that.
I think that's the one I'm talking about. It's the one that'll fit a full-size graphics card, full size, and fit a like 240 millimeter radiator to cool both the graphics card and the CPU.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. I thought that was like 250 or 300 by the time they got to market.
After the Kickstarter, you're absolutely right. It could be expensive, which you talking about saving money, that $50, I'm surprised a case like that's $50, but I guess it being smaller, it's less resources.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to experiment with this one. And then to be truthful here, I'm going to move the mic so you can see this. There's a wooden computer back there. See that old one up on top? That used to be my case for my HTPC. And once I get all the experimenting done with this, use it for the projects that I have intended for, I'm going to probably install it next to my television in the living room and use it for Steam games. So, because I mean, imagine like a super cute little tiny machine that fits on a single shelf space, and you can just run a couple of wires to the back of your system and you're good to go. My wife's happy about that. So,
and being
now that I'm living. Exactly. The other thing that's really nice now is with the GTX 970, you can get the cards down into a really small range. So the card is designed specifically for mini ITX boards. It's only 6 inches long, as opposed to like 11 or 12 with like my R9 290X or my Titan. So, it's pretty good. I'm satisfied with how it's going to turn out. Just wish my graphics card wasn't TU when it showed up, but that's my fault. I ordered an Amazon warehouse deal. And I'm going to give you guys a warning right now. Amazon warehouse deals great if you're buying like a chair, a piece of clothing or something like that. But when it comes to computer parts, I have had nothing but problems with the warehouse deals. Things are either not working, they're burning up when they get there, they have like cracked screens, all kinds of weird stuff. So I don't know what Amazon does to check over products when they
probably don't. They probably just look over for physical damage and then repackage it and ship it. But most of the reason why electronics get returned is because they break.
Well, and I've even gotten sets of RAM where I ordered 4 DIMM slots and I got 2. So I was supposed to get 32 gigs of RAM and I got 16. And they're like, why are you returning this? I'm like, well, what? There's four. There's supposed to be four in here, and I got two. What the hell is wrong with you? And no one opens the box up to look to find out that two of them are missing. And I almost wonder if there's some kind of scam where people are going and ordering from Amazon, taking two of the items, and then sending two of them back, and they just give them credit for it. And I don't know the secret ins and outs, but maybe if they don't have computer savvy people, some of those things slide, and then whoever did that ends up with a couple sticks of RAM and saves like $100 or something. I don't know. Anyway, on that note, let's move on to something a little more interesting here. I've got the Panasonic GX8 up on the news list here, and that's pretty sexy. Are you familiar with the GX7?
I am. I was able to shoot with one once, and I did like the size and the weight of it, but I haven't used one extensively. Are you a big fan of the GX?
I've messed around with it, basically just played around with them in the stores, but the GX7 is in a price range of like $350 to $400. It's like a mid-range point and shoot. I think the 7 had that weird like 24 to 90 millimeter focal range, and it was like an f1.7 wide open all the way up to like a f2.3 or f2.4, something strange like that. Well, it sounds like next week Panasonic will be announcing the GX8, which is the predecessor to this, and this will predecessors before. That's not the right word. It comes after. So the successor.
There we go.
The GX7. There we go. I can use the English language. Man, I'm just flailing today. Anyway, it looks like they're going to include the same lens that's on the LX100, which is a 24 to 70 f1.7 to f2.8. And of course, key feature 4K is going to be added to this. It'll be a cute, nice little point and shoot camera. And this could kind of go toe to toe with Sony's 1-inch 20 megapixel RX10 Mark IV. Is it Mark V? Whichever version of the RX has the 24 to 70. There's so many numbers floating around in my head between the 100, the 10, and so on that I'm getting them all mixed together. But I expect to see this in a price range of under $500. So that's a full-fledged point and shoot camera plus video, 4K features, and you're looking at something in the price of a GoPro. What do you think about that, Devin? Is that compelling?
That is compelling, especially because of the lens that is possible to put on it. 24 to 70 is a little long, I think, for a Micro Four Thirds, but the fact that you're getting f1.7 to 2.8, I think is really strong compared to a lot of the stuff you pick up when you're trying to use a Panasonic camera.
Well, I think, now correct me if I'm wrong, but the RX, I think it's the RX10 Mark IV. It might be the RX100, but anyway, I think that's a f2.8 constant across its zoom range, not f1.7 to f2.8. So it might have a little bit of a heads up on that. I might be getting that confused though, because the other focal range, I think on the RX100 is 24 to 200 at f2.8 constant. So maybe I'm wrong. I actually, you know what? I think I am wrong. But anyway, the point is here.
It is compelling. Especially, we're going to talk about GoPro in a bit here, but seeing that we're still waiting for GoPro to kind of come out with their next revision of their camera and where that's going to go as they're looking at building their own sensors now, or use their own sensor technology as opposed to buying others. But these point and shoots are becoming so cheap, and the quality of them and the 4K and everything else with the lenses and everything else is becoming so ideal. It's kind of like, I feel like GoPro is going to have a hard time staying in the market if their cameras keep being priced way up where point and shoots are at. And all it takes is somebody like Panasonic to make a point and shoot that's mostly waterproof like they have in the past and have decent specs on it. And people are going to start considering that over GoPro, people who shoot. I mean, GoPro is established as a brand that'll never go away, but people might start considering, maybe I'll just get this point and shoot because it takes like 24 megapixel stills and it's got 4K video and image stabilization, and hey, it looks great. So
now, speaking of GoPro, we might as well roll right into that article, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a little ways in the news. The GoPro session, I think I said season last time I was talking about that. It's not season, it's session. Definitely session. I can totally read. Anyway, the Hero 4 session is basically a tiny version of the GoPro 4 Silver Edition, I believe. So let me bring this up so everybody can kind of see this. For those of you not watching the video and just listening, it's basically this tiny little square. Internal battery is included, so you cannot change the battery. It's waterproof as opposed to needing a housing. Otherwise, it shoots 1080p as well as 2.5K, which was a feature of the Hero 3 Black Edition. Otherwise, nothing really exciting to report here. Slightly longer battery life. They're claiming 2 hours, so probably expect an hour and 15 minutes. Devin, do you see anything I'm missing that makes this an amazing buy at what, $399?
For me, the price doesn't make any sense. I think maybe they're trying not to cannibalize sales from their lower range cameras. They're silver. Do they do a white 4 as well? Do they still do the white, silver, and black?
Okay, so I'm not 100% on the color scheme, but the lowest price unit shoots 1080p, and it's like $147 or $150.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they have the old, like, traditional, like, GoPro blank or whatever, which is supposed to be their, like...
They have the middle line that has the built-in screen on the back, and that one's like $299. So $399, where does this sit? I mean, would you run out and buy this? Because it doesn't seem like it's a step forward to me.
If it's going to be your first, then there might be some reason to get it. I do like that the size is small. That's always been a little bit of a complaint of mine, is that the way that they build the camera, because it's pretty clearly like they're putting a sensor and a lens on a board, and then behind that board attaching a battery, or a screen, and that's how they run things. And so I've always wanted them to get smaller, something that makes sense if you put it next to the helmet or something like that. And I feel like smaller is their demo, because that's what GoPro is supposed to be known for, is getting it into tight places you don't normally throw other cameras, and it being a bit rugged. I really appreciate the added battery life for being the smaller size, but I've seen some of these videos with some sharpness tests like you have, and it's pretty clear that the Hero 4 Silver got higher quality to it. Now, I kind of feel like partially that it's not just a sharpness problem. It's also the bit rate, I think, is a lot lower on the Session than it is on the Silver. So it's one of those that, I guess, if you want the best quality, there are better cameras to get for that price point, because even the Silver will get you a better experience overall. Because being able to have that screen on the back, if it's your only GoPro and you're one of these people who just take it out as like, I'm hanging out with my friends, I'm going to bring a GoPro, we're going to the beach, I'm bringing my GoPro, having that screen on the back makes it much more fun to use, because you can start to put it in narrow mode or medium mode and see what you're shooting. Otherwise, if you're shooting blind, you always go wide because you just want to make sure you don't miss anything because you're shooting blind. So I kind of like the size, and I understand using the phone as a control surface probably helps to increase the battery life, but it's just one of those that not one thing about this is compelling besides the fact that it's, I don't know, built-in waterproof and its size. And for the price, it just doesn't feel like that size and step back in quality is worth it. I'm guessing this is a stepping stone until they start coming out with the 5 Series.
Now, I'm going through and looking at the prices here because I was getting confused. I knew there was one that didn't have a color on it, and that is the cheap one. So the GoPro, just plain old Hero, that's the one for $129. And that one doesn't have the Max screen, but it is compatible with a phone app. Looks like you can plug it in to a USB adapter. I'm looking, the Silver is the one with the built-in screen on the back, and it's priced exactly the same as the Session. So it's $399.
And they do make the Hero, I guess that's what it's called. It's just called the Hero. They do make a Hero with a built-in LCD screen, but that jumps the price up from $130 to $300. Which is a little bit of a pricey jump for a camera that's quality doesn't increase as well.
Well, that's kind of strange because you can buy the back plate for the Hero, and I've got one actually right here. The backpack.
I don't think you can attach it to the. I don't think you can attach that to the Hero. I think if you look at the back.
Oh, is it missing the adapter rail?
Yeah, it's missing the hooks and it's missing the little board that's supposed to, like, it has something there, but it's clearly not the same size. So it looks like an expansion port, but not for any of your old accessories.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it right now, and Devin's absolutely right. Let me share this with you guys. On the back of the Hero is an SD card slot as well as a USB port, but it is missing that accessory shoe that you need for the screen. Now, you could go, let me see what the Hero 3 is, actually. The Hero 3 is still for sale, and it looks like you can buy the Hero 3 Plus Black Edition in, what, $299, $300 basically? So, you know, you'd almost be better off going with the older Hero 3, getting the backpack, and you would have a little bit more versatile tool for, you know, about $100 less than you would spend on the Sessions or Season No, oh man, I did it again.
Let me correct myself real quick too. If you do get the Hero Plus LCD as opposed to just the Hero that doesn't have a plus, it does up to the 1080p recording from 30 to 60 frames per second. So you do get slightly more features if you go for the Hero Plus LCD as opposed to just the Hero, I guess, which justifies that price bump a little bit more. But for $300, you could get a Hero 4 Black, which I'm pretty sure would blow the Hero Plus out of the water, because I'm pretty sure the Hero Plus probably uses plastic lenses like all their old cameras have been.
Yeah, as much as I rant about GoPros in general, like I have 2 or 3 of these on my desk right now, and I use them all the time. So they're not bad tools. I love them to death. I use them all the time. It's just frustrating to me that they're not keeping up with a lot of the other stuff that's out there. And this is not keeping up. This new addition to their lineup is just something smaller and at the same price. Now that we're starting to see 960 frames per second out of Sony's new lineup of cameras, and even their point and shoots are sitting in the $700 range. You're almost, I know it's not an action camera, but a lot of people who buy these for action camera purposes, they use them once or twice, like you said, to go out to the beach. Maybe they dip it in water. They're really excited. They do that one shot of their kids swimming or whatever. And then after that, what do they use it for? Well, they use it to like film little bits where they're, filming themselves, or like they're in their yard or whatever else. You don't necessarily need something that's extreme waterproof and, tactically able to get thrown on the ground a bunch of times in order to accomplish that sort of thing. And I think in the long term, many people would be better served with that sort of device, an actual camera, as opposed to a GoPro.
Overall, I think that the session is really targeted towards people who do videos on their motorcycle. They do sports videos. They're shooting themselves, whether they're BMXing through the forest or something like that. That's always a common one, or surfing. I feel like if it's just that's the one camera you buy and you want to go record yourself doing stuff, that the session, just because of its size and battery life and everything else, probably makes a little bit more sense. For anyone who's shooting video for clients or for production or something like that, is going to appreciate a lot more being able to swap out batteries, being able to put in different cases or whatever, and like being compatible with LCD backpacks to line up the shot before you put on a battery backpack for storage capacity. Or like I said, I think they're $35. Those extended batteries where it's a battery pack and a backpack all mixed into one, those things lasted me forever on my GoPro Black. So those would all better serve somebody who goes out and shoots and has productions and is doing multi-camera stuff, as opposed to if you're just a person who goes snowboarding or something like that and wants to record it. Yeah, then I could see a session being useful for someone like that, because they're going to attach it to one spot, record some video, and call it a day.
Now, one other thing that's noted on the Hero session is that it's good for 33 feet below. So are the other units in the case rated for that depth? And maybe that would be the reason, is maybe scuba diving or some sort of like extreme underwater type of stuff. Because 33 feet, that does seem like a fairly significant depth to go with a Hero 4. I don't know if the plastic case is rated for that depth or not.
Plastic cases were rated for that. I'm not totally sure, but I feel like, yes, that is what they're supposed to be rated for. Ooh, a leg mount. I haven't seen that one before.
There's a leg mount? What are mounts? Anyway, the nice thing about having any GoPro is that you can fit into small places and you can go underwater. So if you have underwater stuff to do, it's not a bad idea. Honestly, unless you really need the size, you might be better served with one of their other offerings. The size is really the only thing that seems compelling to this. Otherwise, not so much for me. If someone comes up with a reason, or you guys think of something that's really interesting about this that I've missed or Devin's missed, send us an email, let us know, or send me a Twitter message or whatever. I'd like to hear it, kind of find out more about what people are using these for. There is a question in the chat room here. Someone was asking about this behind me here. This is my Canon EOS M, and he was asking if I still use this. Actually, I use it all the time. I was looking for a camera that I could keep on here for a little while I'm still dealing with trying to balance this TV cam unit here. So that is what I'm using it for right now. I've got the 22 millimeter f2 lens on there, and it is great for that sort of thing. This is a very light, compact camera, and with Magic Lantern running on it, you can do quite a bit. For those of you listening, I was basically just touching the EOS M in the background. Moving on down the line in the show notes here, let's take a look at this really affordable AOC 4K panel. This guy is $349. This is probably the first in this range. In the past, we've seen 4K panels from Samsung as well as ASUS, and those panels were roughly $600, $550, something in that range. This one looks like they're doing the same thing as they did with those early 2560 by 1440 panels, where they actually got panel stock that wasn't making the grade for Samsung or Apple or whoever, and are releasing this in kind of a chintzy little case at $349 for a 4K 28-inch TN panel. That seems like a pretty good deal. Devin, what do you think about this guy?
I think that it forces people who are looking at monitors right now to ask which they'd rather prefer, 4K or IPS. Because for the same price, that's what I bought my 4K or my IPS 1440p monitor for. Monoprice usually sells them around this price. There's a lot of other Chinese manufacturers on eBay who do the same price. And it's one of those that's convincing, because I feel for myself, I would have probably gone with the 4K 6 months ago when I bought this monitor if it was between 4K TN or 1440p IPS. As much as I love the IPS, besides like an output monitor for color correcting and stuff like that, I could probably get much more use out of 4K in terms of resolution and room on my timeline and room to stretch and have icons and all kinds of fun bits, as opposed to going with the IPS display. So I'd probably go with the 4K if I had to go back and make a choice rather than an IPS, but it's very compelling. It almost makes me want to switch over to like a 224 or 2 28-inch monitors editing workflow instead of what I've got right now, 3 monitors.
You have 3 monitors. Now I got a question for you, because I've tried doing 2 monitors and it's really irritating me. How do you feel about the bezel? Does the bezel bother you?
It's funny. I don't edit through the bezel. I know a lot of people stretch their timeline across the bezel, and then the bezel's kind of in the way. The best I could do, I guess I can just show you here if I've got enough cord. But generally speaking, so over here is everything's backwards to me, so you'll have to give me a second here. So my right monitor here will be an output monitor. And then I'll have like the center monitor where I hang out with DJ, and this is where my timeline is, which is a 28-inch 1440p. And on the left, I've gone vertical, and that's usually got a list of footage. So because it's vertical, it makes more sense to have a bazillion icons and scroll down. My eye can read a few icons per row faster than it could read several icons for a few, columns or whatever. So all that combined, my workflow actually works a lot better going with 3 monitors. So that's kind of why I'm in that workflow with 2 1080p's and then a big monitor in the middle that's 1440p. So that's why 4K would make more sense for me. But generally, I never stretch my timeline over. The monitor on the right is an output monitor, and that's what I'm using for color correcting. It's a big preview, so I can see every pixel and make sure I'm not losing anything. So as opposed to you, it sounds like you probably scrunch your timeline across all your monitors when you work.
I only have 1 monitor. I hate bezels.
Oh, okay.
I cannot.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
Right now in front of me, I have the Samsung. It's the U5. I just wrote it down. U28D590. That is I think I paid $550 for it. It's a 4K panel. It was one of the first ones to hit the market that was 60 hertz. 28 inches is too small for me, honestly. I use this panel all the time. I like the space. Realistically, editing, having a 4K panel means that you can put a full 1080p window up in the corner for your preview window. You can see clips in basically full size without having to scale them down. And of course, your timeline and your clip pane are big enough to where you can kind of see pretty much everything you need in order to get going. But at 28 inches, the text on the screen and Premiere and After Effects does not necessarily abide by the rules that you get when you set your text or text size in
your
Windows.
DPI settings inside the operating system. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm just like,
maybe it's me having old eyes, but I could have a workflow with 1 monitor and 1080p in the corner. Having a bigger monitor that's at least 24 inches, that's 1080p, I know I'm not going to miss any pixels. All the pixels are big enough that I'll be able to account for all of them to make sure there's no dead pixels in the footage or anything like that, or any glitchiness going on. And so then that alleviates a whole section of my workflow. So usually I'll have a timeline across the bottom, and then and I'll have it pretty tall too, because I don't really have any video frames. Usually my source window's on the other monitor too. But then across the top, I'll have like effects, I'll have color correction curves and stuff like that. So it's like if I take that and put that off to another monitor, then it frees up space on my current monitor, and I'm not necessarily working through a bezel. I'm doing a bunch of stuff on one monitor and noticing how it changes on another monitor. So they do make really thin bezels though, DJ. They make some really thin stuff now. You know, we're talking like maybe 0.5 centimeter of bezel.
My dream monitor right now, and I'll bring this up so you guys can see it, is the Seiki SM40 UNP. That's a 40-inch 4K panel. And I mean, maybe it's not my dream monitor. I kind of actually also have been jonesing for one of those wraparounds. The curved,
the ultra wides.
Yeah, 380 by 2000, I think, is or 1440 by 38, whatever. You know what I mean? The big 32-inch curved
super
panels.
wide. Yeah,
they're super wide. They're curved around. Those look really nice. This Seiki panel, though, is 40 inches, and it is fairly good in the color department. There's profiles for it to get it, and it's 4K. So for me, that size means that I can still have my full preview window, and they actually kind of are advertising this towards video editors, showing an editing screen here that looks pretty nice. But this guy is way more expensive than what you're getting out of this $349 4K panel. Looks like even warehouse deals, which I just warned you against, are $774, $999, so $1,000 pretty much to get in the door if you want to get this guy. It looks pretty sexy. That's kind of what I've been wanting to upgrade to, but I just don't have enough space right now. I'm trying to figure out how to arrange this room. My building, they're just starting to pour concrete, so I won't have another 2,000 square feet added to the place until probably the end of the summer. So until that time, I'm stuck in this really tiny office. And
well, while we're talking about workflows, you've got in the show notes here palette interfaces. Is this this looks like a bunch of digital knobs and switches and faders that you plug into your laptop via USB for Lightroom, DJing, I guess, and editing. Is this something that you would be interested in like trying out and using?
Yeah. Okay. So Devin just stole my transition and totally rolled on to the next thing here. Yeah, the palette interface, if you haven't seen this yet, I've got it showing right now on the screen for the listeners. It's magnetically coupled dials, switches, and buttons with a single LED unit that is like the head unit to control everything. And by magnetically clicking these together, you can set up the interface for whatever you want, and you can set the controls to do whatever you want. There's a simple programming system for it, so you can assign a fader, a button, or a knob to any command line or button on your keyboard. And they've already got presets for Premiere, Lightroom, After Effects, and a few other Adobe products that we all use and love. This thing is what, $299, Devin?
Yeah, there are some basic kits, which when I say basic, they still include about 5 or 6 functioning control surfaces for about $299, $300. Obviously, there's lots of packages up and down. Depending on how big you want to go or how small you want to go. And then you can individually purchase a lot of these add-ons for $30 to $50, it looks like, depending on which controller you want to use. It's definitely fascinating. It's one of those things that it's not just got USB controlled switches. It looks really slick. Everything snaps together, which for me professionally, I wish that there'd maybe be like a solid option, because sometimes I need to pick like my keyboard up off of my computer, or I got to pick something else up. But I understand what they're trying to do here is make it really slick to reconfigure for whatever you need, and I appreciate that. And I also like the fact that it seems really reasonably priced. This is one of those things that I expect like 5 switches cost $1,000, because that's normally kind of the like boutique. This is like kind of super high end, really fancy stuff. The only downside, besides I want a way to permanently connect them, would be that they don't put an easy place for labeling. maybe it's just me, but like if I walk away for a few days from labeling and come back and I've like recently reconfigured, I'd be like, well, wait, what does all these knobs do? And I'd have to go look them up and stuff. It'd be nice to have labels, but it looks like they do have color feedback. So there's a ring around every control surface and it'll actually, I guess, flash different colors. It'll, I don't know, change mood lighting. I'm not sure what the color feedback is for, but I imagine it's programmable for your knobs or whatever you're doing.
Now, while we're looking at devices like this, do you remember, man, I can't remember what the name of it was. It was a shuttle device that was basically an app for your iPad or your Android tablet that would work with Premiere and give you full shuttle controls of Premiere. It was a Kickstarter unit about 2 years ago. I've even met the guy that wrote the app for it and worked on it several times. Really nice guy. But I can't remember what the heck it's called. I want to say it was like Shuttle or Shuffle or something like that. No, that doesn't sound right.
No. Well, because Contour's Design has been doing shuttle controls for a long time for Mac OS X and Windows for people who do Premiere or DJing and stuff like that.
Okay, it looks like it's called Control Plus. Here we go. Let me share this so everybody can see it. Control Plus, this is basically a fully integrated control unit for Premiere Pro as well as After Effects. Gives you your shuttle features here. You can kind of scroll through some of the images and you can see like basically you have everything you need to cut, shuffle, play, stop, edit, trim and all that stuff. And then there's different ways to customize the interface. And then they have smaller versions for your cell phone. It works via Wi-Fi on your home network. And I did play around with this at the booth at Adobe's demo, and it was fairly on top of things. There wasn't a lot of lag or anything. And that app, I think, is only like $20 or $30. So another option also, and because now that I'm thinking about all these, this is something that I've seen and used a few times, and it's a little hokey, it's a little ugly, but it's basically a shortcut key menu for your your desktop keyboard. This one in this case is a full keyboard with all of the stuff on there, and it's all of your shortcut menus for cutting, for your cursor select, everything that you normally do in Premiere. And I have these shortcut keys for the most part memorized, so I don't need to do this. But having a keyboard like this, or even buying the stickers, I think you can buy a sticker set for like $7 and attach it to your keyboard. It will really speed up your workflow. All of these things are really handy.
Probably the best part, though, is just learning JKL, because that works in like every editor. Heck, even on YouTube, you can use JKL to fast forward, rewind, and pause inside of a YouTube video.
Oh, I never tested on YouTube. I didn't know that was still a thing.
Yeah, along with the number keys, which will take you to the different percentages of video completion. Hitting J and L will skip ahead like 5 seconds or skip back 5 seconds.
Now, one side rant here and a little bit of a complaint. When I move between Audition and Premiere Pro as I'm working on audio, the mouse select button is V in both of them, but the cut is C in Premiere and it's R in Audition. And that always throws me for a loop because I'm hitting C thinking like it'll give me my razor blade icon and it doesn't. And then I'm like, well, wait, okay. And then I have to hover over it to remember, oh yeah, it's R to trim, and it's, I don't know, it's just one
first world problems. I struggle with that. Like probably every other weekend I end up in Audition and I struggle with that exact same problem.
I know. It's like, can I reassign this somehow? Like make it easier for me? I don't know. Just make it the same.
I'm too lazy. To reassign it. Plus I've got a thing about kind of learning what all the defaults is in order to being able to pick up anyone's edit machine and start working on it. So it's one of those that I really should change, though, because it's frustrated me enough after enough time that I should just change the damn bind.
Man, we should just change this to Devin and DJ Talk editing. Oh, man. I've been doing so much editing over the last couple of months that, all the commands that I used to sort of have memorized, but I'd have to look them up every once in a while. Now they're all just like bam, 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 no problem. So it's kind of different. One other thing before we move on that I want to talk about with this palette unit is if you're doing audio, faders are really nice. Especially, if you're doing a full band mix or something like that, or you have a bunch of channels of audio, maybe you're doing surround sound or you're bringing in like some musical cues along with some sound effects and multiple channels of speech. Having faders for all those controls is really handy. And honestly, I wish I had faders here at the studio, because sometimes I just want to, I don't want to draw with a mouse. I want to hit play. I want to hit record on the fader controls, and I want to just follow the audio up and down as the timeline progresses. And that's what I used to do working on music projects. I had a MIDI controller that was plugged into a keyboard, and the keyboard had a bunch of like fader knobs on it. Something like this might be the way to go especially for musicians. I was looking at the list, though, for Palettes interface program options, and it doesn't look like they're really addressing music per se right now. It seems like they're focusing more on like Lightroom and Premiere and After Effects. So I don't know where that's going to go.
To be honest, I can understand that being a second thought for them, because I feel like there is a lot of already MIDI interfaces for DJing and controls and stuff like that. That market's already pretty saturated. Not that, it wouldn't be nice to have a product that could do both, help out with video editing and well as audio mixing. So I'm hoping that they're going to come out and do more with that. And one final note, like the iPad app and stuff like that is really cool stuff. And I think it's really awesome that they do that. But 9 times out of 10, I really love physical controls, and especially when you're talking about with faders, being able to grab exactly what you need to grab and move it without looking at it is huge. You would never, like, if you're in a live video production and you're switching cameras, you would never want to switch cameras with like a mouse and a keyboard or a touch screen, because you're going to hover your finger above the button, and then when you need to take it, you push your button down and hope that you hit the right button. It's that tactile feedback that's really important if you're like trying to do things in sync, or just to be that assured that I did what I wanted to do, as opposed to a touch interface where buttons can move and slide around. They're really great for certain things, but I think in some situations, especially live production, they definitely aren't, and no one uses them live. So it's something like this, these physical buttons that I see where I go, oh man, if I had like a row of arcade buttons and I hooked that into the Adobe multi-camera mixer, I could sit there like a video switcher and just hit buttons all day for each camera shot and all that. I mean, I know I can do that with, 1, 2, 3, and 4, whatever, and the buttons on the keyboard, but having dedicated buttons set out in front of you just makes it that much more fun. And
I know a couple of editors that do multicam that actually have a separate 10 key off to the side, and they sit there, and they use that for their multicam. And I mean, watching them go, it's pretty impressive, because they're just like, and they're not looking at it or anything. They've got all the number format memorized, and they're just banging through it, just nailing it every time. I love seeing that sort of thing live. It's awesome. I did add to the show notes, guys. So if you're looking for it, it's Control Plus console. That was that Premiere app I was talking about. It also works with Final Cut Pro. So if you're trying to find that, I know I had to look it up. So hopefully that will help some of you looking for an app to control your stuff. Moving on down the line here, we've got a few other random items that are in housekeeping. One is SSD hard drives. I talked a little bit about this with Mitch, but Mitch isn't much for computer stuff, so I figured I'd throw this over to you, Devin. This is a 2 terabyte SSD from Samsung. Looks like this will be coming in an 840 EVO and a Pro Series drive. The Pro Series, they're offering a 10-year warranty on these now, so that's really impressive for an SSD. Price is reflecting the size of these SSDs, though. We're looking at an MSRP of $1,000 for the Pro version and $800 for the Evo. Still, this is probably the first 2 terabyte consumer grade drive out there that isn't in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. What do you think about this guy?
I'm only glad because I know that this is going to push prices further down. Other than that, this isn't marketed towards me. I could see it maybe being useful for something like a Blackmagic camera. You got to do long recordings. You don't want to swap out drives all day, or you only have one drive slot and you got a lot of time of ProRes you need to burn into one chip, whether it's a long recording or you're doing some kind of live production. But I'm excited to see that. I'm hoping this will drop 1 terabytes down and kind of force the rest of the market too to start dropping 1 terabytes down to match it, because I would love to put 2 1 terabytes together, which, on average, even these Samsung Evos their 1 terabytes are going for $320, like you've got listed here. So $640, and you have, about the space that you would have this giant drive. 2 things to consider is that, one, when you start rating drives, while you do get an increase in performance, you also get an increase in the ability to lose your data. It sounds weird because
Devin.
Yeah, well, because what's the likelihood that a drive is going to die? And it's not very likely at all. But mathematically, the more drives you add on, the more likely one of those will die. And that's why RAID technologies usually goes hand in hand with producing replicate data, so that as odds go up that you will lose a drive, you start protecting more and more of the data, because eventually that'll happen. So if you're just rating 2 drives, it's not something to be terribly concerned about, but it is something to think about, that every time you add a drive in a RAID, you're increasing the likelihood of a failure. And have you planned for that? Do you have your backups done? So it's one of those that actually what I've got, I don't have it ready here in the notes, but there is one company, I don't know if it's Silverstone or who, but they make those CD-ROM drives that no one uses on their computers anymore, 5.25-inch bays. There's one company that makes a 6-bay SSD storage for one of those 5.25-inch bays. So
really, how do you get 6 SSDs into there?
Yeah,
I mean,
you cram it. Yep, you cram 6 SSDs on top of each other. It comes with a fan, because goodness, it's probably going to get hot in there. And but you can fit all 6 in there, and then in one bay, I'd be able to have my RAID set up, because chances are, I don't know if I'd go to 6, but I know I'm definitely probably going to get 4, maybe 500 gigabyte drives and RAID that together as a RAID 0 to get the increased performance as well as the storage space. But me doing a RAID 0 means I'm backing up, and I'm backing up to the cloud and to local storage and a bunch of other stuff, because backups are really important, especially if your RAIDs are RAID 0s. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm just hoping it keeps dropping these prices down, because I'm right on the verge of buying that bay adapter and popping in a couple SSDs for using more raw footage on the fly.
Now, I will add a few notes to this here. If we are doing RAID 0 with SSDs, the theoretical limit where you start saturating any RAID controller is about 3.5 SSDs. So your maximum for getting any more speed out of a RAID 0 configuration with SSDs is about 4. 2 1 terabyte drives from Samsung, the 840 Evo, that's 350, I believe. The 960 Crucial drives that we were looking at before the show, they're 320. So you could really build this for probably $600 to $500, which is, out of 2 SSDs. The other thing to note is that in my personal opinion, I've switched over to a lot of, especially for smaller installs, I switched over to laptop size 2.5-inch drives because they don't generate as much heat. So if I'm trying to create like a fanless system or whatever, I've started, you can buy the 1 terabyte and the 1.5 terabyte drives for so cheap. It's like $50 to get a laptop size 1 terabyte spinning drive. And
a good point about that too is that you don't necessarily need to lose all that performance that you might want with an SSD. I mean, in your situation, home theater PCs, they basically boot up and then they're done with the hard drive. There isn't a whole lot they do with the hard drive unless you're storing media on there. But even if you are, you don't need super SSD speeds to enjoy your media quickly. But if you're in another application where you want a smaller mechanical drive, those hybrids are going really cheap too, where they throw in like 64 gig or so of SSD or 32 gig of SSD mixed in with a 1 terabyte hard drive. And that does a little bit of caching and helps to keep the system running about as fast as an SSD, but still giving you all the storage. And that's one of those things I feel like technology just glossed over because SSDs started getting so cheap. They just started loading hard drives with full SSDs. But there's a lot of those out on the market that are really reasonably priced. If you want a ton of storage, you only have 1 slot, and you want to get a little bit more performance in there too. So I think that's something a lot of people don't consider, but those drives have gotten really good at their job of caching. And I've seen them run really well, even though it may not be as fast as an SSD, run really well compared to the fact that I have a terabyte of storage in 1 slot.
Now we're being computer podcast here.
Yeah, we are. We're doing it again.
I have a couple of the Seagate XT drives, which are what you're referring to. They have, I believe, a floating 8 gig SSD attached to a 500 gig drive. And I was testing those out. They aren't bad. The problem you run into is that if you do anything besides booting your operating system and leaving the computer on for a long time, it starts to think that booting your operating system isn't the thing that's most important to you. The other things are. And so then you go from getting really fast boot times to getting slower and slower boot times, depending on how long you leave your system running. And you can't control the algorithm. So you can't say, hey, this is the stuff I use all the time. I need to make sure that I have fast access to this. The better option, I think, is if you're going to go with spinning drives and an SSD, you can get something like, especially since OZC got bought by Toshiba, you can buy the old 120 gig or 256 gig drives for somewhere in the range of like $100 or less. And you can attach this to your system with a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte spinning drive. And then there's a bunch of different applications that are available that will help you set it up in the same configuration, basically, that Apple's using in some of their laptops, where it will store most access files on your SSD and then store like backup media and stuff like that on your spinning drive. So that's a configuration that you can kind of roll your own if you want to go that route. The other thing I wanted to note is that I actually launch all of my media for my HTPC from my server. So it's even less speed access because, that's either Wi-Fi or even if I was using Ethernet, you're capped out at about 100 megs read speed. So,
right.
And it doesn't matter because, you're launching like a 1 gig file to watch a television show or a movie or whatever. It's not that big.
And those bit rates are far beneath what normal file sharing local LAN file rates are at. So, and before you run out and buy anything, though, I think we should mention that Prime Day is coming. Not that we know what that holds, but this Wednesday, Prime, if you haven't heard, Amazon is, if you're a Prime member, throwing some kind of huge sale. It's supposed to blow Black Friday out of the water. So, Black Water is a completely different thing. We're going to gloss over that mistake. So Prime Day, I'm hoping it's going to be a lot of stuff that people normally buy off Amazon, which is usually electronics-based stuff. But since this is the first one, I feel like no one really has any idea what's coming. It's just Amazon is making some big claims, and there's websites going to have a lot of traffic on Wednesday. But if you're out looking for hard drives or something, you might wait because you might find some good deals. I mean, like I know right now, 5 terabyte internal hard drives are running for about $140, $130. I'm thinking they're probably likely to have a sale if somebody's doing a big sale like this. So it might be worth waiting until Wednesday to see if you can find a better deal on some of this computer hardware.
Man, holy crap, they are. You just caught me off guard here. I was actually transitioning a few systems from 1.5 terabyte drives to 4 terabyte drives last month. I didn't realize 5 had dropped down so low in price, and they're 7,200 RPM. Damn, I might have to snag a couple of those. I'm capped up against my my space here on the system I'm sitting in front of right now. Let me see what I've got. Everything. Hold on, I can actually share this. You guys can see this mess that I live in here right now. Every single drive, even my 1 terabyte SSD for my operating drive is, they're almost like 2/3 to 3/4 full, and I'm just running out of space fast. So I might have to swing through and grab some of those. That's a good idea. All right, enough computer talk. Let's move on down the line to an actual camera. This is the Sony QX1 mirrorless style camera. I guess they're calling it mirrorless lens style camera. That's the actual name of it. I didn't make that up. This is
it sounds like you did.
It looks to be a sensor in a can. The battery type that it's using is going to be the same battery type that we see in the A7S as well as the A7 line in general. It is an APS-C size sensor. We're going to get 3 frames per second for photo burst. It does shoot 1080p. It's a 20.1 megapixel sensor, and it has good ISO range up to 16,000. What do you think about this, Devin? You think this is going to beat out the Olympus Air at all, or is this even worth really considering at $399 versus the Olympus Air's $299?
You know what? I know that as soon as I'm going to see a bazillion videos side by side of these two shooting it out. For me personally, I'd go after the cheaper one because, like we've discussed before when we talked about the Air, this feels more like a bit of a niche, like a walk-around product for me. It's not something that I'm seriously going to want to put a lot of cheddar towards. But it's...
You say cheddar?
Yeah, I did say cheddar, yeah. But the Sony, it's, for me, I'm like, hey, look, it's replaceable battery and stuff like that. There's a lot to like, but once again, it's pretty much the same comments as before. I think it's just Sony establishing that, hey, we're in this marketplace too. Make sure that Olympus doesn't walk off with some really cool product without us fighting for it first. So for me personally, I can't really say anything else than what we've said about the other one in the past. I think 2 or 3 times it's come up on the podcast where it's really cool. Attaching your phone, it's not something you'd use for a photo shoot, but it's definitely something that you could literally hold a lens in your pocket, pull it out and get some cool shots, whether you're hanging out with your friends or you're walking around at a flower show or something like that. And it's a camera to have fun with. And it's, for me, 300 is a price point where I go, okay, this is replacing my point and shoot. At 400, that's a little pricey, and I hope that their image quality reflects the fact that they are the pricier option.
Now, I didn't realize this, but it looks like Sony has been just kicking out a ton of these. You've got the QX10, the QX100, the QX30, as well as this QX1, and all of them have different focal ranges, different types of built-in lenses, different megapixel ratings. Some of them are 18 megapixel. There's a couple that are smaller than that. Some of them have 10 frames per second photo shooting mode, that's pretty impressive. That is
really impressive.
The problem for me, though, with this guy is that I don't really have that much in the way of Sony glass. So
no.
If you already have a couple of APS-C Sony bodies in your collection, say you're shooting on the A6000 or something like that, maybe getting one of these is conducive because it's way cheaper than a new body, and you can use your Sony lenses in that sort of super tiny configuration with your cell phone. The other thing to note, though, is that while Sony kind of keeps their app proprietary, Olympus has basically opened up the air to programming. People have already started working with the API in order to adapt it for different things. And they've also given out all the design specs for the back mount so that people can build custom mounts and stuff. This has been out in Japan for quite a while, like 5 or 6 months, and people have already started developing apps for it. So there's a lot more available and going for the Olympus Air than there is for the Sony QX1. The Air for me is really the fact that I own a ton of micro four thirds lenses, and it's, $299. That was an impulse buy. I mean, that's cheaper than a lens. I just pulled the trigger on it. Mine's on pre-order. It'll be coming whenever it gets here at the end of this month or the beginning of next month. That's such a good deal, and it's cheaper than
it's a good point too that you brought up all the other people who are like making their own apps and stuff like that. Good on Olympus for that, because you come out with a unique product and then you let your audience kind of decide how it should best be used and stuff like that. I think that's really smart on their part, because it is one of those that's really fascinating. It's slightly outside of a price point where I'd grab it, but it is very, it's one of those where it's like, man, I'd really like to just take one out and try it out because this looks like a really fun product that kind of brings, just the fun back into photography, because you're not being serious. Because for some reason I get in the mindset when I have my serious gear to then get my serious face on and be really serious when I'm taking photos.
What? Really?
Just because there's like, I start going through, okay, well, let's do this with the light and everything else. Sometimes I need like a really fun point and shoot camera to kind of get me to turn off my mind and go, just have fun. Stop taking it so seriously.
Man, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm guilty of, setting it in burst mode and then just holding the trigger down a lot of times.
And just getting lucky. Just
you're running around with like kids, or you're doing like a shoot where it's, someone's senior picture. You get the shots that they're going to want. Backlit hair, a little bit of glow, out of focus background. There's a log in the shot, or they're leaning against a brick wall because they're the things you're supposed to do. And then after that, you put the camera in burst mode and you hit down as hard as you can on everything they're doing. And then you glance through at the end of the session because, data doesn't cost anything. And, oh, yeah, that looks really cool. Okay, let's delete these all out of focus shots that didn't turn out well. And that's where the Panasonic GH4 has really changed the way I work with stuff, is because the burst mode is so high on the GH4 that you can just nail out tons and tons of shots. I think it's like 13 or 14 frames per second. Whereas with like this slow Canon 6D I've got in front of me right here, you're limited to about 4 frames per second. It's real slow. The Canon 7D was another one that had a really nice burst mode. It was like 8 or 9 frames per second, and that made it really nice for that sort of shooting style. I know it's not right, and it's probably not the perfect way to go, but it's so nice to be able to do that, especially if you're doing sports. I mean, I don't know how much sporting events you cover, but if, like, for example, I was shooting at a diving competition a couple months ago and people were, jumping off a diving board. Well, you want to get that great shot where they're in the middle of the air or they're just splashing down, and you don't have time to really compose your shot as they're going into the water. But if you put it in burst mode, aim up at the top and just follow them all the way down, pray to God your, focus system tracks properly, and you end up with some amazing shots in the middle and the end as they're coming off the diving board. And especially when you combine that with that monster lens that I don't have on my desk right now, that 50 to 150 or something like that with the doubler. I mean, man, it really just nails it. I know I'm lazy, so, mock me as much as you want.
He's sitting back in the stands with a long telephoto being like, do I have to get up? It's just...
Anyway, the Sony QX1, it's a thing. It's $399. If you're interested, it's actually selling right now. You can get it shipped to your house next day via Amazon Prime. The only thing to note is that the early complaints are that it's very laggy and very slow. It's not open source, so you probably won't be seeing anything but what Sony decides to give you. And you are limited to 1080p shooting on this at 30 frames per second. There is no 24p. That also is the same, I believe, with the Olympus Air right now. So they're trying to limit the specs that you get out of these units for video because they don't want you to go out and buy this versus buying an actual DSLR or SLR or Evo camera.
They're still trying to make sure they don't cannibalize their own sales.
Yeah, and I don't think we'll see anything out of Canon like this, but it's nice to see that Sony's doing it. Olympus is doing it. I'm guessing we'll probably down the line see something from Panasonic. That would be great. Maybe these will even start leaking into being able to shoot 4K in the next year or two. The whole idea of this is great. It's just they need to figure out a way to communicate with your phone faster. Wi-Fi is not the most ideal, especially if you're at like a conference or a big event or something like that. Although I will say, talking to Mitch, he has had really good luck with the Wi-Fi audio adapters from Rode. So, maybe they're starting to come up with some better solutions for that sort of thing. Not sure. Let me see. What else do we have in the show notes here, Devin? Anything else you want to cover before we roll out of here?
No, I think we covered everything pretty well and in depth.
Man, we really went off topic and rambled around a little bit here. So thanks everybody for sticking with us. As far as the editing stuff goes, I've added those links to the show notes again. So if you want to find that, also all the show notes have the parts for that mini ITX build that I'm working on. Pretty sexy system, $800. Well worth checking out, especially if you're just looking for a gaming system. In fact, on that note, Devin, where can people find you?
ImpulseNetworks.tv, where hopefully if my client load gets any lighter, I'll be able to start posting out some more reviews and some of my opinions on some of the products that we talk about on the show.
I'm going to be locked here in this room right here editing the rest of the evening and tomorrow and the next day and the day after that because I just love being in my chair in this hot room for all that time. You can find this podcast on iTunes, on SoundCloud, and anywhere else podcasts are distributed. Be sure to swing by DSLRFilmNoob.com. You can find me on Twitter, DSLR Film Noob. Make sure you send us some questions because we love to get those from you, and we love to hear from you guys. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. However you ingest this thing, we'll see you next time on another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. Devin's rocking out in the background. You can see him moving around. Yeah.
It's a catchy song.
Devin was asking me about this. This is actually a track that I removed my vocals from. Used to tour with a band called the Hot Carls way back in the day. And that is one of the hit songs from the album. And by hit, I mean a few people listened to it on some college radio stations.
Wasn't bad.
Yeah, and didn't hate it. So there you go. All right, Devin, anything else you want to add before we get out of here, man?
No. Keep shooting. Keep loving film.
What? You're just going to throw out some generic, like, hey, guys, stay in school.
I got nothing else. Oh, I've bored everybody. I got nothing else left in me.
All right. That's the end of the video broadcast. Yeah, it's really warm in here, man. I need to get an air conditioning just installed in this room. The vents are not keeping up.
You should probably get it underneath your desk.
Yeah. Actually, okay, before I stop, one of the things I'm thinking about doing, and somebody write in if you know anything about these, they sell these split units. I don't know if you've seen them. It's like you see them in Europe a lot. When I was in Iceland and in Greece last year shooting, I came across them in pretty much every hotel, and it's like this long box, and it goes along your wall, and then the tubes for the air conditioner go out to the back, and then the compressor sits out like a normal unit would. So you have the compressor sitting outside the room or outside of the house, and then it's just a head unit. It's sort of like a window shaker, only it attaches permanently, and it's got a full size compressor that's outside of the house. And they're like $3,000. I think I found a way to buy them on Granger for like 1,800 or 2,000, and you can install them per room. So even though we have ducks in the house, this room is kind of out on the corner and it gets a lot of sunshine in the afternoon. So I'm thinking maybe putting one of those on the wall and then using that to cool the whole room down. So
that makes a lot of sense for the noise and everything else, getting the compressor outside the room.
Yeah, and so you're not just putting in like something in your window, it's actually going outside. And they're a lot more expensive, but they're higher BTU, so you can keep a full-size house with like 3 of these cool at 60 degrees, So that might be the way to go. I don't know. I have to get the building built first before I can afford to start throwing in giant air conditioners and stuff like that. But I mean, you can see, look at me, I'm sweating in here. I'm freaking sweating. It's that warm. And then having the GTX R9 290X underneath of me, it's not doing me any favors running at 375 watts. Ugh.
Nah, it's just cooking you.
Yeah. All right. I'm stopping the video broadcast now. Later, guys. Later.